This is Chris at Montana Troutfitters. We're tying up a little caddis pattern this week. I like to call this one the Finals Week CDC Caddis. Call it that because it's more appropriately named the Finals Week Hatch around Bozeman rather than the Mother's Day Caddis Hatch, because typically it occurs on the Madison and the Yellowstone right in the middle of Finals Week for all the MSU students. To tie this pattern today, we're going to use a Gamakatsu R10B, which is a matte black retainer bend barbless hook in a size 14. Tailing material is going to be Zelon olive brown. Body is going to be super fine dry fly dubbing brown olive. Our wing's going to be CDC Super Select and Rusty Dunn. Our overwing is going to be deer body hair, natural brown. Our antenna, we're going to use some little tarantula legs, brown, size is mini. And finally, so you can see this thing, some fluorescent fire orange Antron yarn. This is a great little pattern to fish this during the Mother's Day Caddis Hatch, or as I call it, the Finals Week Caddis Hatch. Real good pattern, floats nice and high, and you can see it. So to start with, these retainer bends have kind of a funky bend to them, but they hook and hold fish real well. So we'll start roughly a quarter of the way down this hook. That way we have plenty of room on the front end to do our wings, antenna, etc. Take this back to the back bend. Trim your thread off. You only need roughly about half of the amount of Zelon as comes in one of these strands, so have it. Hang it out the back. Do a nice soft loop. Tie down over the top of this piece up to about that quarter point where we tied in at. That'll just help give you a nice even underbody. Pull that back, trim it out. Then you can just go in and kind of thin out your tail here. Doesn't have to be exact, but roughly half of the body length or so. It's just a little trailing shuck, more for looks and a little buoyancy than anything. Next we're going to dub in our body here. Nice thing about this dry fly dubbing, one, it dubs on the thread fairly easily. Two, because it's so fine, you can get yourself a pretty decent little cigar taper to your caddis. Now your Mother's Day hatch, typically caddis have kind of a darker olive body and they're about a perfect size 15, so there is no perfect hook size for that Mother's Day. We always joke, split the difference between a 14 and a 16, but it truly is about a size 15 in caddis. Just going to dub that little cigar taper in there. Pull off any little excess we have. A nice little fat caddis body. Next we're going to use that piece of CDC. This is going to be your underwing. You want to measure this out so it extends roughly just past the back bend here. Tie that piece down. Trim out. Because this is an underwing, we'll use this same piece, double stack it, give it a little bit of extra floatability, really give it a nice full underwing. Next step in this pattern is going to be to add in your little rubber legs for your antenna. Why at this stage? Well, because we're going to do our deer hair next, and it's really much easier to do this here than it is to try to do it on top of your deer hair. So we'll set those in on the top, up at the front. Wrap back. If you need to, you can come in and trim out any little excess you have on the back end there. Now you have your deer hair, which I've already stacked here for time purposes. You use deer instead of elk because deer has a more mottled look to it. Set that deer hair right over top of your CDC, tips just extending past the back. Give this a couple of good thread wraps over the top of that deer hair and then flare it out a little bit. Now before we trim off all of that deer hair, we're going to tie in our little piece of loop wing over the top here. This is just simply to see the bug. In the middle of that hatch, there's so many naturals on the water, it's almost difficult to pick out yours away from everything else. We'll lift everything up, take our thread underneath, whip finish, underneath and onto the hook. That's always the best way to finish a fly. And we'll do a little surgery here. Gather all of that hair together. Don't gather the rubber legs. And just come in here. Give that head a good trimming. If you have any errant hairs, come in and pluck those out. And the last step, cut out our loop. Situate those legs, and you're done. That right there is your finals week CDC caddis. Olive on the bottom, hot orange on the top.